Namaskar, Shalom. A lot of deliberations have taken place in Israel since the October 7 dastardly terror attack. Now, clamor is growing in Israel for strengthening of border security management and to ensure that October 7 like terror attacks don't happen in future. That is why an important meeting of the Knesset, which is Israel's parliament, its important meeting took place on national security. There is a committee in the Knesset on national security. So a lot of deliberations took place there, and the members discussed the ways and means to strengthen the border security in the state of Israel. To talk more on this, we have with us a very special guest from Israel. We are now being joined by Ms. Sharren Haskel. She's the member of the Israeli parliament, the Knesset. She belongs to the National Unity Party. Earlier, she was with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's Likud party, but now she's in National Unity Party, which is headed by Benny Gantz. She has also served in the Israeli Defense Forces as a combat soldier during the Second Intifada. And currently, she's also a member of the Knesset's Committee on National Security. Ms. Sharren Haskel, first of all, many thanks for speaking to India today. Shalom, Baruch haba.
Shalom, Sunil, and thank you so much for doing such a coverage of the atrocities and the war that we have here in Israel. Thank you very much for collecting the evidence and the facts and broadcasting and bringing them out like a real journalist, because what we've seen on different media where they collecting some information from terrorist organizations, it would be equivalent as if you would collect information from Al-Qaeda or from ISIS. So thank you very much for collecting and bringing a lot of the facts and the events that had happened.
Right. Let me begin by asking you that what exactly happened in that important meeting. You are a member of Israeli Parliament's Committee on National Security. A lot of deliberations took place, and the important aspect that was discussed was that how to strengthen Israel's border security management. Just give us details that what exactly happened in that important meeting.
So we discuss the readiness of small towns and bigger, also even cities, who have the risk of infiltration, and how to prepare them for a war or just in a general emergency state that we are currently in. We understand that in the attack of the 7th of October, when thousands of terrorists charged the border, invading 22 cities and towns, the first to respond were local troops who were armed and were guarding their own towns and their own cities. That was a force that was able to hold back many of these terrorists. There are so many bravery stories, specifically one, I think it was from Nir Oz, one of the towns, where the head of this troop of this town understood what is happening when she heard the arrival from air from some of these terrorists, and prepared the entire troop. I think there were about 12 of them in different positions in the town, and they were able to hold back those terrorists and defend their towns and their people. And so, realizing that they are such an important force, we were able to build 527 small groups like that who are ready to defend their towns and their city at any given time.
Right. I understand that many issues must have been discussed, but what came in the public domain was that, there was some sort of unanimity on, that civilians need to be armed, particularly those civilians who are living near the Gaza border. The process to obtain arm license is now going to be made easier. Just give us details about this particular aspect.
So it's important to understand that here in Israel, most people, Jewish, when you turn 18, it is mandatory to serve in the army. So most of the population has had somewhat of a training with weapons and with defense. So, well, we understand that during these times, we have to make sure that our citizens are well armed and are ready and prepared to defend themselves. So those people who have served in the army and do have a training with weapons and know how to use it properly, we will give them in order to build sort of a group of security and defense for every single town here in Israel. It is such a good force to give a first response until the army arrives. And this is something that we learned that, when we were surprised by such a massive attack like that. And the first troop to respond were these people. And we need to arm them properly. We need to train them properly. And they can give a really good response in defending those people. I mean, try and imagine towns who were not organized as properly were butchered. They were massacred. The terrorists moved from home to home and destroy and burnt alive entire families. So
are the civilians? Are the civilians going to be armed with assault rifles?
Yes. So there is also an option for citizens to be armed with guns, personal guns. But the 527 groups that we created, it's like a first respond group. They will receive rifles, proper ones that are capable of fighting the Kalashnikovs and the rifles that Hamas is using, that our enemies are using.
So how many squads are going to be created in the border areas?
So it's not just the border areas. If there is something that we learn also from investigating closer the plans of those terrorists, is that this attack was meant to be far wider and far more devastating. They can arrive from the south, from the north, and therefore we have to make sure that every single town and city are prepared, not just the ones that are next to the border.
So what you are trying to say is that squads will be created, particularly in the areas which are adjacent to Gaza border, but even in areas like maybe Tel Aviv suburbs, where people should be better prepared so that October 7 doesn't get repeated.
Absolutely. I mean, look, on the North Front as well, we have an Iranian army called Hezbollah. I mean, they're a proxy of Iran, and they sit in Lebanon. They have created chaos for the last years as well in Lebanon, military-wise and economically-wise. But they're a proxy of Iran. They are an army funded and trained and operating by the hands of Iran. And so they have already fighting and creating harassment on the border. We had a few people who died and lost their lives in attacks of cells of Hezbollah. So we have to guard our front border as well. Our Syrian border as well has to be guarded. And so we understand that there were mortars that were shot from the Syrian border too. And so the entire state of Israel has to be covered. We had just 2 days ago a terrorist group from Jenin, which is in the West Bank, in Judea and Samaria, trying to plan a vicious attack as well. We were able to stop them in advance, but we have to prepare our citizens as well from an attack that might come from this area as well. And so you need to understand that the entire state of Israel, if you look on the geography of the Israeli state, has to be covered and safe.
Right. You also spoke in that particular meeting that took place few days ago, that important meeting of the Knesset Committee on National Security. For the benefit of Indian viewers, can you just tell us that what exactly did you speak, and what were your suggestions to the committee?
Well, I've been working even before the committee have joined, requesting from the chairman of the committee to immediately gather the committee to speak about these first response teams, because we understand that there was some failure in not arming them properly and not getting them ready properly. Understanding that many of them that were capable of defending and pushing back those terrorists. Many lives were saved by that way. And so it took a week for them to sort of gather around. But by the time that the committee had gathered together in order to discuss it, they were already halfway through in distributing weapons and building those first response teams. It was very important for me because many citizens that were calling me were they were very desperate, and they were very stressed and worried whether they will be able to defend themselves after the sight that they've seen of what had happened in the towns of Be'eri, of Kfar Aza, of Sderot. So they wanted to make sure that they are capable of defending themselves and defending their families.
Right.
So the amount of calls and people who requested that was massive. That's why I asked to join it.
So, Ms. Sharren Haskel, what were the decisions taken in that meeting, and are those decisions binding on the Israeli government?
The committees in the parliament are meant to do the oversight and these inspections on the work of the government. And so once we set the date for this committee, the police forces realized that they have to respond quickly as well. And they did it really, really quickly and very efficiently as well. By the time they arrived to the committee, there were about 280, I think, first respond team that were already ready. By the second one, they already had 527. So obviously we worked together. They bound by law to some of our decisions, and they need to give answers to all of the questions. This is our job as parliament member, to do the oversight and the inspection, make sure they're ready.
So, Ms. Sharren Haskel, what you are saying is that the decisions taken in that meeting have already been implemented.
Some of them, not fully, right. But by the first committee, there were, let's say, about half done. By the second one, I can say that they were about 90% done. We will do another one to make sure they're all prepared and ready. Okay,
so the squads which you are talking about have already been created in the border areas?
Yeah, they are already working armed and ready in all the borders area, but also many towns inside of Israel as well that are not bordering area.
Right. Ms. Sharren Haskel, the last time we spoke was on October 8, you remember? And since then, a lot has happened as far as this current conflict is concerned. So what's going to happen next? Because Israel has mobilized thousands of troops at the Gaza border, and there is talk of ground invasion on Gaza. Is it possible? And is Israel really planning to go for the ground invasion? Because more than 200 hostages are there in the captivity of Hamas.
Yes. First of all, yes, we will enter Gaza, but we'll do it on our terms. We'll do it when the troops are ready, and when we know that we dismantle a lot of the first respond danger. It is dangerous to go in there. We know that there's supplies ready, but we're going to make the ground as safe as possible for the Israeli troops, and we've given enough time for Palestinians to evacuate from their homes as well, leave it as a site for a battle between Israelis and Hamas. Hamas is using this innocent civilians as human shields. They are shooting rockets from dense populated area, from schools, from hospitals. That's where they're shooting rockets from. The devastating destruction of a hospital just last week happened because they were firing rockets from the facility of that hospital. One of the rockets that was faulty, it wasn't working good, fell straight back on that hospital, and that's how, unfortunately, they killed many Palestinians, children as well. So you understand, the Hamas has no value for life, not Israeli life and not Palestinian lives. And so we are trying to make anything possible to make sure that there's the least casualties from civilians, that are non-participant in Hamas.
Ms. Sharren Haskel, you talked about an important issue because Israel is facing flack from many quarters, from many countries, from many activists that they have gone for a major offensive in Gaza. They are carrying out airstrikes, and innocent Palestinians who have nothing to do with Hamas are, facing the brunt of this conflict. Major humanitarian crisis has emerged. So Israel should show some restraint, and it should at least ensure that there is proper electricity supply, proper transportation of humanitarian aid from the Israeli side. How would you respond to that?
I will say that no one looked after the humanitarian needs in Dresden when the Allies bombarded it. Would you supply the Nazis with any kind of supplies? I mean, you are fighting a terrorist organization. You literally are fighting Nazis. You're fighting ISIS. And so, Israel is not going to supply it. If the international community is passing it through the border of Egypt, this is a different story. It's not through the borders of Israel. But no one, try and imagine Pakistan attacking India. And then the international community is asking India to supply humanitarian aid to Pakistan after they viciously attacked and butchered. If I would try and calculate the percentage of the population in India, it would come to hundreds of thousands. Can you imagine an attack by a terrorist organization on India that murdered hundreds of thousands of Indians? And then the international community will ask India to supply humanitarian aid to Pakistan? In what kind of world does that make any sense? I mean, look, Gaza is an independent autonomy. They can run their own life. They can build infrastructure. They could build their economy, everything. It could be a Singapore. It could be a Hong Kong. Instead, they turn it into an ISIS, into a terror nest.
But Ms. Sharren Haskel, the argument that comes from the Palestinian side is that Gaza has been subjected to suffocating blockade by Israel.
Well, Sunil, can you explain to me, can India make a blockade on Pakistan? No, because Pakistan is bordering other countries as well, right? Even if India completely seal the border with Pakistan, Pakistan can still enter supplies from other country, right?
So what you are saying is that so what you are saying is that onus is also on Egypt.
Well, Gaza has a border with Egypt as well. Did anyone ask why Egypt is closing their border as well? I mean, it's not Israel. Once we evacuated and we give them independency, they need to stand on their own feet. I mean, we through the years have opened the border, bringing supplies, letting people come and work in Israel, creating cooperations, everything. And time after time, what we received in return was missiles. And so if they wage war on Israel, are you surprised that we closed our border? Bring those complaints to Egypt. They have a border with Egypt. And ask yourself, why does Egypt close this border as well? And let me tell you why. The biggest export of Gaza to Egypt are ISIS troops. So many times that Egypt in the Sinai desert was attacked. People were murdered in mosques, in churches, by ISIS troops. Most of them were exported by Gaza. Therefore, there isn't an interest for Egypt to continue this exportation. They are suffering from the Gazan terrorists as much as Israel suffer from it.
Right. Ms. Sharren Haskel, I also want to touch upon on another important issue. Recently, a video surfaced on social media where an European diplomat is seen paragliding in Gaza. And now a lot is being written about it on social media. What exactly did happen, and how is this being viewed by the Israeli officials, by the Israeli parliaments, in light of what happened on October 7th?
Well, that's the thing. Every time someone reaches their hand to Gaza in the attempt to create, a peaceful life, some cooperation. I mean, this program was to give some liberty and some freedom and some sport action for children, for adults in Gaza, to teach them how to paraglide. But when every single thing that was donated and contributed to Gaza turned into some kind of an attempt or a weapon or a facility to create more terror and to attack Israel. I mean, so you have the paragliding that the representative from the European Union went into Gaza in order to teach them some of their first lessons. And what did they turn it? They didn't glide for peace. They glide to murder. They glide to butcher. They glide to massacre.
Ms. Sharren Haskel, you are saying something very important. So what you are trying to say is that the European Union diplomat who visited Gaza a few months ago, and he was seen paragliding. So you are saying that he started paragliding teaching there.
Look, he started paragliding and teaching then. I don't think he thought that they'll use it in such a horrific action. But, when UNICEF sent emergency kits for children, for school, they didn't think they're going to use it in their truck as first aid for terrorists. That was the kits that they took on those pickup trucks. And so when we say that humanitarian aid is being used by Hamas, is being distributed by Hamas, it's being given only to Hamas activists and not to citizens that are not participant in terror acts, that's what we mean. Mm-hmm. And so right now, it's in their face, but I know that many of these trucks, anything that hasn't been checked, that wasn't distributed by international force, will reach Hamas.
So you are saying the humanitarian aid that was recently sent to the civilians of Gaza is actually going to reach to Hamas?
Most of it, absolutely. I mean, they're controlling everything and they know it. It doesn't reach Palestinian children. It reached warriors, it reached terrorists. They send it down in their bunkers in order to feed their soldiers and their terrorists. That's where it's being used. So unless it's being distributed hand to hand from the international force to that child that needs to receive it, Hamas is going to steal it, use it, manipulate it. That's how terrorist organizations work. That's how they act.
Ms. Sharren Haskel, since October 7, we have seen a rise in anti-Semitism in many countries, particularly in places like UK, even in United States, in Canada. So how is Israel, responding to this particular, phenomena? How are you talking to your counterparts in United States, in UK, with the governments of these countries? Because recently we saw some horrific crimes taking place against Jewish centers, on the Jewish community, and even the protests. There is one thing, I just want to make distinction. There is one thing to talk about two-state solution. That is one thing. And there is another thing that, many groups have come out openly in Western countries, shockingly, and they are openly supporting Hamas. So how is Israel responding to this situation?
Well, we're quite worried. I mean, a lot of my family members live overseas as well. They are hiding their Jewish identity. There were doors who were marked by a Star of David in Europe. People are taking down their mezuzahs, any kind of symbol that can identify them as Jews. They're taking off. There was a head of a synagogue that was brutally murdered in the US just 2 days ago. My niece that goes to school in Texas, a child that sits with her in lunch said, "I'm going to kill all the Jews." There were already terrorist attacks in France, in Belgium, and they're yet to come. When I say that this is a war between radical Islam and the Western world, this is a war on our values, on the way that we want to live our life in liberty, in democracy, in equality. This is an attack on that, on our values. And we have to join together to combat that, to combat racism, to combat terrorism, to combat the darkness.
Since we spoke about anti-Semitism, I just wanted to, ask you one thing that, India is the only country in the world where anti-Semitism was never allowed to come up. And Jews have lived in India for centuries. They have risen to, top positions. We had one of our most celebrated generals, one of the most famous Jews of India, Lieutenant General J.F.R. Jacob, who played an important role in India's victory against Pakistan in 1971 war. So how does wider Israeli, audience, how does Israeli people view India? And is this fact acknowledged that Jews have never faced any kind of persecution in India?
Well, there's a very special bond between Israelis and the Indian people. We have the same kindness and the same warm attitude. And I know when I traveled in India, and many Israelis always want to come back. They want to come back to the warm people of India, to the beautiful food, to the hospitality. There's a strong connection there. And we feel somewhat at home. We feel safe, and we're grateful for that. We don't share that bond with many other people or with many other countries. And Indian people are always welcome in Israel as well. We share so many, of our values and our thoughts and the way we live, and it's very special. And we're very grateful for the Indian people that they are combating anti-Semitism and don't allow it in. It's not taken for granted. We know how that is challenging as well.
Right. Ms. Sharren Haskel, you spoke to us. Many thanks for speaking to India today, and it's always a pleasure talking to you. And we hope that situation gets better in Israel and peace prevails. Many thanks once again for speaking to India today. Toda Rabba. Shalom.
Thank you very much, Sunil. It was a pleasure to talk to you, and thanks and best regards to the Indian people. Keep safe.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.